Hi everyone. Have you wanted to paint your own Christmas ornament on wood using watercolors? I am Catherine from Catherine Urban Art. I am part of the Pigeon Litters design team and I am here to show you just how to do that. Here are the items that I use to create this wooden ornament. So I start with a piece of wood. You can get those at craft stores or order them online. I have my husband make mine. So we pick up branches from around town and around the yard that have broken off in storms, dry them, and cut those. You need a watercolor ground. Several brands of these are out there. I use twine. I use P.H. Martin's bleed proof white. I have a piece of sandpaper, paint palette. These are the colors I'm going to use for this. I have a metallic purple, a metallic blue, and a watercolor black. It's just a matte, it's not metallic. And then I have a brush that is acrylic brush, and then I have two watercolor brushes. I have the Pigeon Litters brush number 10 round and number 2 round. I do have a little hook to put in the ornament right there. And then not pictured in this, but I also use a archival gloss to spray the ornament at the end. So I do have that also. So those are what you need and what I use to create this ornament. These are the little wood pieces that I use for my ornaments. You can find them online or at most craft stores, especially during the holiday season. So this is one of the little wood pieces that I chose to use for my ornament. The first thing I do once I have my piece picked out is I try to brush off all the extra sawdust and little just pieces of bark and things that are on it. I do leave the rough edges on my ornaments. I think it gives it more of a nature feel. So that's the first step. To make this work as a watercolor ornament, I have to add what is called watercolor ground to the piece of wood. So there are a lot of makers out there for watercolor ground. This just happens to be the one that I have. I have a Core brand watercolor ground, and I'm going to paint that on here to keep the watercolor paint from soaking in to the wood. So that's kind of a first process and first step of creating the watercolor ornament. My watercolor ground that I have is a little bit thick, and I like to thin mine down so I have a smooth coat over it. So what I do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to add a little bit of this to another container, and you can see mine's pretty thick. It probably needs to be watered down, and it can be watered down. It doesn't hurt anything. So I'm going to get my water and add a little bit of water to it with my paintbrush. So I'm going to take this and just water down this so that it becomes smooth. So I mix it, try to make it smooth, a little bit thicker than maybe a milk consistency. My brush that I use for this part, I don't use a watercolor brush for this part. I use an acrylic brush. It's a little bit firmer so that the watercolor ground goes on a little bit better. The watercolor brushes just seem a little bit too soft. So once I have it thinned down, and I like mine thinned down so I get a smoother coat on it, I then come around and just paint the ground onto the wood where I want to put my painting. And you can see it's pretty thin. So what I usually do is I do a few layers of the watercolor ground, but I let it dry in between. A lot of times when I'm making ornaments, I will make multiple ornaments at one time. So I'll get my watercolor ground out and I'll paint about 12 wood blocks, wood pieces, and let them dry. And then by the time one's dry, I can go back and start the next one. And then I have several prepared and ready to go when I'm ready to paint them. So you can just see there's my first layer on my wood slice of watercolor ground. And anytime it starts to thicken up like this, I just get my paintbrush wet, add a little bit more water, mix it in. And like I said, I'll put a few layers on there because I like mine thin. I have put it on thick before, and I just don't like the thick bumpiness of it. So this to me makes it thinner by just adding water and adding layers versus one thick layer. It's a little bit smoother that way. So that's what I'm going to do, is paint a few more of these. And once it's dry, then we'll go on to the next step. Layer number 2 going on to the wood slice. I now have 3 layers of watercolor ground on this little wood ornament piece. What I like to do next is to take a little bit of sandpaper and smooth it out. If you look, there's a couple little spots that are a little bit rough. You can leave them if you like. I like to sand mine out, so I have a little bit of fine sandpaper, or even a sanding block works. And I just kind of brush over it lightly. I don't want to brush it so much that I go back down to the wood base, but I just smooth out any rough spots on the ground. So I just give it a little bit of sanding. I brush off that dust, and then it's basically ready to go ahead and paint. For this ornament, I'm going to paint a metallic night sky. I am using metallic watercolor paint, so you can see it there. And then I'm going to paint right on my ornament. I do suggest you let the watercolor ground dry overnight before painting on it, but that's up to you. You can kind of force it dry with a heat gun also. But a lot of times I will paint one day the ground, and then the next day come back and paint the ornament with a watercolor. And like I said, I usually do several ornaments at one time, so I have all the ground painted and come back in and do the watercolor. All right, so my sky, I have a metallic purple and a metallic kind of like icy blue color here that I'm going to go ahead and paint my sky with. These are my favorite colors for the night sky. So on an ornament, they look really good when they're metallic because they shine and sparkle in the lights of the tree. So I'm going to start by figuring out which way I want the top of my ornament to hang. So I think I'm going to hang it maybe like that. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to start with purple at the top. So I just add this on. Sometimes it does take a couple of coats of watercolor paint because I like mine to look really thick, sparkly, not very opaque. So I'll put on a couple layers. So I'm going to start with the purple at the top. I put the purple at the top so it's darker, so that when I add stars, it shines through a little bit more. And I will probably put 2, maybe 3 layers on this in between. So then I fade this out as it comes down. And then I'm going to start down here with that icy blue. And then I just blend them together. I'm going to come back in and put a little more purple on this. And you can see that watercolor ground allows that paint to sit on top of the wood, not soak in. It gives it that chance to blend like a watercolor paper would. And then I just keep adding layers until I get it how I like it, how I like the blend. So I'm gonna let it sit there like that for right now, kind of soak in, dry up, and then I'm gonna put another layer on top. I have added about 3 coats of watercolor paint on top of this. You can see it does have a little bit of shine to that. That's why I like using the metallic paint on this. Regular watercolor paint also works just as well. So either work, but the metallic really stands out when you put it on a tree. So I just like that. Now, the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding trees to my background. And when I do this, I like, since it's a round ornament, I like to have my trees kind of pointing more towards the center. Also, if you notice on this one, you can maybe see there's the lines from where this was cut. And so that just kind of angles my trees in that direction. So I like to do that. It makes it just kind of go with that piece of wood. Also like to kind of say that I didn't buy this wood. My husband goes around, and when we have storms in Texas and the branches all fall down, we pick up those ones that are about the size we would want for the ornaments, and then he slices them up. We let them dry out, and then they're used for ornaments. So these are actually trees that had been fallen in either ice storms or the bad spring storms that we get in North Texas. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use black paint for the next step in this. So I have my black watercolor paint right here. And I am going to draw lines on for my silhouettes of my trees. So this is the top up here. I like my top of my sky to be purple because I'm going to add stars and they will stand out. I usually do the bottom blue so that the trees will stand out against the lighter blue. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to just draw some of the where I'm going to have my trees. So I just use my small paintbrush and I start by just drawing some lines in. So, and they all kind of point towards the center when I do this. And those are going to be the tree trunks in my painting. So that's probably where I'm going to put my trees. And like I said, I like to draw the lines to begin with for the tree trunks. Then I'm going to come in and start adding the branches in. And I just keep doing this for the most part with the black paint, so it becomes a silhouette against that night sky. So I'm going to start with my tall one here. And that's the first step of tree number 1. And then I just keep going and adding to my trees. And then that's the base coat for my trees. And I'm gonna let them dry for a little bit. I'm gonna come back on and add a second coat once this is dry. One of my things I like to do is make one side of the tree just a little bit darker than the other. That gives it a little bit more feeling of being three-dimensional. So sometimes I'll come in and I'm gonna add on this one, the left side just a little bit darker than the right. You can have a little bit of dark on the right, but overall I like to have that side darker. Gives those trees just a little bit of a three-dimensional feel when one side is darker than the other. So just adding a little bit of black right over top of that on the other side. And then I like to kind of fill in at the bottom a little bit. Now my black is not metallic. I could use a metallic black, but I just used a flat black paint on this. If you want to add some light to the other side, sometimes I will do that. What I use for that a lot of times when I want to add white highlights is I use bleed proof white, and I just put it in. I'm gonna move this over, and I just take a little bit of it and put it in my paint tray like that, and then using my brush I water mine down a little bit. The more you water it down, the more transparent it will become. And then you can even add a little bit of highlights in your trees over here, or you could add more and make it look like snow if you wanted to do that. Just to bring out just a little bit more, to make it look just a little bit more three-dimensional. So the trees aren't flat. You can keep them flat, they look great flat too, but I just add a little bit of that to make my trees look 3D. That is the same thing I will use to make my stars in the sky. So once I'm happy with my trees, then I come in and I use the bleed proof white to make stars in my sky. And again, it's just a flat, very flat white. It's not going to be metallic. And then I come in, I use a little bitty brush to do this. You can use like a paper clip. Sometimes I use that, or something pointed, or the end of the brush. A lot of times you can use the other end of the brush, but for me, I feel like I have more control by using the tip of the paintbrush. So I just come in and I add stars to my sky. You could add a moon, you could add shooting stars, you could add the North Star, whatever it is you want, whatever you're going for, you can add to it, and you kind of start to see those stars. Something about adding stars that just makes it feel more like a sky. And I like with a bleed proof white, sometimes they'll be lighter, sometimes they'll be darker. To me, that makes it feel like more of the sky too, when they're not all the same. If you put in enough, you could actually make it look like snow, even if you wanted to do that and add snow to the trees. And that's basically how I make an ornament with just a silhouetted trees and a night sky. I have a few steps to finish up on it, and then it is good to go. Once my watercolors are completely dry, I will take them outside and spray all my ornaments with a gloss. So this one is a Krylon archival gloss, but it protects watercolor paint. So I go give it a light spray. It gives it a little bit more shine on it because I do have the gloss, and it will protect it in case anything gets on it or any water drops on it. You don't have to worry about the watercolor smearing or smudging. So I will give it a light spray of the gloss just to seal it and protect it before I finish up the rest of the ornament. So I'm going to go take mine outside and spray it. I'm not going to spray it on camera, but I am going to spray it and then finish up the ornament. All right, this has been sprayed. Just gives it a little bit more shine and, like I said, protects it. The next step I'm going to do is I have a little hook I'm going to add to the top. Some of these come with the hole already in them. I have done that and I've put the holes in them, but I really just like the way they hang better with just the little hook. So on this, I just have one of these little hooks that I put in there. I'm not sure. See if I can get it through this bark. What I like about these is usually you can just put them right in and they'll go in. This is an oak tree, so this is a little bit harder to do than pine. So see if I think it's starting to twist in there now. So I just twist one of these little hooks in to hang my ornament with. I think I'm going to need one more tool for it. Okay, get that and twist that in. So there's a little hook in it, and then I take twine. So I have just a little bit of twine. Cut it. And you can make it whatever length you want, of course. Put it through. I like to put mine through like this so that when I hang it on the tree or hang it on the wall, it hangs okay. And then I just knot the other end and trim off the extra. So there is the extra I'm going to trim off. And then usually I will sign the back and date the back so it has that on there. And every now and then I'll put a little ribbon up here if it just needs a little something extra. But for the most part, this is the way I make them and the way they look and the way they usually hang on a tree. I'd like to say thank you to everybody who watched this tutorial. If you follow it and you paint some Christmas ornaments or any other pictures on wood using this tutorial, please feel free to tag me on Instagram at Catherine Urban Art. I would love to see what you've done, and I would absolutely love to share them and show others what you've done. Thanks for watching.